Hey there, YouTube. A lot of people have wanted me to be talking about this. So, yeah. I got the new amiibos. Got Bayonetta, and I got Cloud. They're not going to stay in their packaging because I'm actually going to play with them. But hey, look at that. Yep. So now I'm going to spend the next hour talking about them. Nah. No, I'm not. Yes, this video is, of course, about the official cancellation of Archie's Sonic the Hedgehog comic, and the almost immediate follow-up that the license was picked up by IDW. I know, because I've kind of been getting a whole bunch of personal messages and people asking my opinion of it, because I've been collecting the comic since I was 10 years old. That's a 22-year collection run, almost. Like, literally 2 months shy of a 22-year run. And, and the comic itself, of course, ran for... Actually, no. Let's talk about this in length, okay? The Sonic the Hedgehog comic ran for 290 issues. Uninterrupted. Like, there was no hiatus ever taken. It ran uninterrupted for 290 issues. It spawned 4 spin-off series, and there were countless one-off specials and miniseries and collections that came out, all over a 24-year run. This makes it the longest-running licensed comic in the history of the medium, and in fact, the longest-running comic book that didn't have a reboot or a long hiatus at any point. I mean, you might say that officially speaking, that particular run ended maybe about 2 years ago, when the Super Genesis wave hit and they did a soft reboot of the franchise. But even if you count back then, that still makes it the longest running comic that didn't have a reboot. And the people at Archie Publications, they can never have that taken away from them. That's something they can always be proud of. This comic had its high points and it had its low points. When it saw cancellation, it was still very popular and loved by many fans, myself included. There were some people who were upset by the Super Genesis reboot, but you must acknowledge that that isn't really the comic's fault. That's an editorial mandate and the result of a lawsuit. We'll get into that in a minute, but that wasn't the fault of the current writers or the artist staff. It was just a thing that happened. Unpleasant things that had to happen. Of course, as I look here at the last published issue of the comic, I can't help but sneer at what I feel is a major reason that the comic ended up getting so unceremoniously cancelled. Riverdale. This. And the full page ad for it on the back. This stupid Dawson's Creek wannabe TV series on CW's primetime block is probably the reason why Archie decided to not even bother trying to renew the license. Like, oh, we don't need the success of the Sonic the Hedgehog comic, we're gonna be getting some CW money from our new TV show! So yeah, I don't like the Riverdale. I watched the first 2 episodes of it, I tried to get into it, but god damn it, that had to be one of the worst adaptations I ever saw. Like, okay, I don't know what the modern Archie comic is, because I know it recently had a reboot to be more modernized, because the old Archie comics was kind of looking really, really campy and stuck in the 1960s, but oh god, like, I didn't collect Archie, but I read it. I would buy a digest issue every now and then. I'd read it. I kinda got it. It was like a romantic comedy series, you know? It's supposed to be funny and lighthearted and... Oh my god, like... The Riverdale TV series is like a 16-year-old's idea of what grimdark would be. That's forever going to leave a bad taste in my mouth. That this bullcrap TV series was probably a major contributing factor to the cancellation of the longest running comic book series in history. But I digress. The Sonic the Hedgehog comic ran for 290 issues. At the time of its cancellation, it had a parallel comic series, Sonic Universe. Sonic Universe, of course, was how they told other stories. I remember when I was young, the Sonic comic was fairly simple. It was in terms of the art style and the tone, it was largely based off of the Adventures comic at first, but using the cast and world of the Saturday morning cartoon. As the comic progressed, it started to shed some of the Adventures tone and become more and more like the Saturday morning cartoon. And they would have occasional specials which focused more strictly on the video games. It was rare that they actually did the video game adaptations within the main story itself. It was usually done like in a 48-page special or a mini-series launched alongside. Notably, that was like when Sonic 3D Blast got adapted, for example. That was done in a 48-page special. Same with Sonic Knuckles, Sonic Triple Trouble, all that kinds of stuff. It was rare, but because back then the games didn't really have much plot to recap. It's like Sonic ran across some stages and jumped on a machine a bunch of times until it exploded. There wasn't much story there. It wasn't until, I believe, Sonic Adventure came out that the comic actually made a real concerted effort to do a story arc adapting the video game, and that they did. And that kind of set the tone for later on, because using the whole we're adapting into the main world of the comic, the games, that was done quite often. Like before the Super Genesis reboot had happened, like they did an adaptation of Tails' Adventure, featuring Antoine and Bunny, which was adorable. Of course, after the Super Genesis Wave reboot, they did a lot more adaptations. They managed to do at the same time an adaptation of Sonic Unleashed with an adaptation of Sonic the Fighters, making them happen at the same time. And to its credit, I thought that was pretty cool. And the comic ended with what I thought was supposed to be some in-between arc filler, Genesis of a Hero. Quick little one-issue recaps of, the Sonic games. I believe they did Sonic, Sonic 2, this one focused on Sonic CD, and then, it ended. It ended unexpectedly, which was sad. So, what I'm getting at is the comic never really had anything. The comic was great. It was a good comic, and we don't really, it's rare. Like, the comic's problems, wide-face cancellation, wasn't the comic's fault itself. Like I said, at the time it was canceled, it was still very popular. This was the publisher. Right now, the biggest entity to blame is the publisher. Not the writers, not the artists. It's unfortunate, but Archie Comics they outright just didn't bother to renew the license. They felt like, I'm guessing it had to do with the fact that Sega is expecting a massive resurgence in the popularity of the proper Sonic the Hedgehog universe with the upcoming Sonic Mania and Sonic Forces for the current console generation. Having lived 2 years without anything, like Sonic Lost World for the Wii U, which came out about 2 years ago, was the last proper universe Sonic game. Since then, we've had 3 Sonic Boom games, one of which was critically and fan panned, like Sonic, like Rise of Lyric for the Wii U. A lot of people said that game was terrible. I gotta say, even giving it all the credit I can, it was at best mediocre. And then it had two games for the 3DS. Shattered Crystal and Fire and Ice, which are pretty good. Not great, but you're okay. Of course, the thing is, nobody's really impressed by a game that's okay. Especially if it's a massive franchise like Sonic. People expect a massive franchise to produce really great stuff. So, if your massive franchise is producing a game that's alright, then it's the same as saying that it's not a very good game. I mean, imagine if there was a mediocre Mario game. People tear those apart. So yeah. My point is that I'm very sure that Sega probably increased the licensing. Like, if you want to license our characters for your comic book, you're going to have to pay this much more, because we're expecting that the character's going to get much more popular and marketable, so, you know, seeing green. And Archie Comics probably, they just decided, nah, let's not do that. Would have been nice if they could have given the writers of the comic a little bit more of a heads up, so that instead of ending the series with a few issues of filler, they could have actually given a real proper conclusion. You know, like maybe the egg bosses rebel, maybe they find a way to override the cybernetics, you know, that kind of stuff. We could have done it. But nope. Just unceremonious ending. Sad, really. Very, very sad, and I'm gonna lament that for a long time. But hey, all smiles, because almost as soon as we're hearing the cancellation of this beloved comic, they decide to bring it back. IDW Publishing, who's very well known for making comic adaptations, notably they do Transformers, Ninja Turtles, bunch of other licensed comics. They're done by IDW. IDW is a good place to go for licensed comic. And they're promising to revive Sonic. Next year they'll start publishing under their own brand, and there will be Sonic comics once again. And you can bet that I'll collect it. I'll get a subscription. I hope that IDW will give subscriptions to their comics. I mean, they're magazines like anything else, but I should be able to subscribe to them. I'll probably go down to a proper comic store to pick up the first issue in person, but after that I'll subscribe. So, what's my ideal future? First of all, I would really love it if IDW Publishing could get back the writers and artists from the Archie run. I mean, I am not gonna lie, I know very little about how the comic industry is actually run. But I've been under the impression that the artists and writers are more or less freelancers, and they just work under contract of a publisher. Like, the publisher, you know, contracts them to do issues for a certain amount of time, and they do that. I don't know if there's any long-term things. I'm not sure how the contracts exactly work, but I've been operating under the idea that that these guys who've been working on Sonic, if they wish to continue working on Sonic under a different publisher, like IDW can hire them and contract them to keep it going. That's what I'm hoping. Like, I really hope that that's how this works. Like I said, don't bother correcting me in the comments, because, like I said, I really don't know how the comics industry really works. I'm hoping that it's basically work for hire at this point, but honestly, I don't know. But I've been hearing some people, they said that that the Sonic comic was basically filled with OCs and glorified fan characters. You know, there's a very vocal minority that actively really hates Princess Sally, for example. I am aware of these people. I know that there's a part of the fandom that's like this. And this part of the fandom, I've seen in the comments of every news feed about these new the new publisher. They're hoping that they start fresh and just stick to stuff with the games. And I'm going to tell you right now, if IDW Publishing decides to just straight up do adaptations for the video games and nothing else, the comic won't last very long. It'll stagnate very quickly, and it'll probably be canceled after only a couple of arcs. Why do I say this? This is because there is not much to adapt from the Sonic the Hedgehog video games. The source material just doesn't have that much in it. Like, you're gonna do the story arcs, like I said, like, you could get a few months of stories by adapting a game. Like Sonic Adventure, that adaptation lasted the better part of a year. And the Sonic Unleashed adaptation, which was the last major arc of the comic, that lasted quite some time. But, you know, like, you can't make a comic book that runs for almost 300 issues over the course of 24 years based on nothing but the video games. There's just not much in there. Alright. I'm getting called. Okay, sorry about that interruption. Alright, so... where was I? Ah, yes, adaptation. Okay, so... I'm an anime fan, okay? So I am totally familiar with adaptation. I mean, a lot of the most popular animes are basically like, take Bleach, Naruto, Dragon Ball Z, so many out there. You basically, like, One Piece, to do one that everyone likes. Basically, an anime is kind of like, you get the idea, like, they use the original manga as if it was a storyboard and basically animate it. Which is great. But here's the thing. When you have a comic that gets adapted into an anime, and it's basically the exact same story, a line for line, shot for shot repeat, that works because you get to see it in living color, while most manga are black and white. You get to see the frenetic action, where in a comic book everything is static. So, you know, like, you're basically seeing an improved version of what was originally presented in the page. But it doesn't work that well going the other way. If you take an anime series, or a movie, or a video game, and you translate it into a comic book, you're kind of going backwards. You're taking something that moves and is vibrant and exciting, and you're translating it into something that's much stiffer. I mean, a good adapter can work around that, but the fact of the matter is that you gotta come up with something else to be your hook. Because straight up retelling something we've seen before as a comic book, when we could have experienced it as a video game or a TV series, definitely gonna lose something. And the Sonic the Hedgehog video games, they're fun, they're interactive, they're exciting, they're frenetic, there's a lot of cool stuff. And then if you see that put into a comic book, I mean, sure, it can all be there, but if you'd already played the video game, you'd be like, whoa, this is just like what I did, this is just like the cutscenes from the video game, but I'm not actually interacting with it anymore. I'm just kind of passively flipping through it. What's so interesting about this now? Like I said, when I was talking about the Sonic X anime, and they did adaptations to the Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2 games in the story arc, and I said, like, okay, yeah, it's nice to see Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2 presented to me as a cartoon series, but, you know, I've already played those video games, and I had more fun with the video games because I was actually interacting with it, and there was no stupid redheaded kid who was inserting himself into every scene that he could. So yeah, like, I didn't enjoy the Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure adaptations in Sonic X as much as I enjoyed the rest of the series. In fact, when it started doing its own original content, like the Meta X Saga for Sonic X Series 2, I thought that was awesome. I loved that. That was original. It was fresh. It was something I hadn't seen in anything Sonic before, but it still felt grounded in the Sonic lore. It was good. And so, like, I know a lot of the people out there are going to be like, just make an adaptation of the video game into comic book form. That'll be great, right? It'll all be great. For 6 months, maybe a year for lucky. Then we'll get bored with it. No, I think they would have to do something original. Okay, like I said, this comic book largely started out as an adaptation of the Sonic the Hedgehog cartoons from 1992 and 1993. At first, it was Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, but it quickly became a full-on Saturday morning Sonic adaptation. And really, like, I know I'm 31 years old. I'm gonna be 32 soon. I'm nostalgic for that old thing. That old cartoon was a very important part of my childhood. The fact that it didn't have a proper ending really made me desire it more, to see it continued more. And the comic book actually being its continuation was basically the thing that kept me coming to it for all these decades. Both of these decades. but I understand younger fans who never saw that old cartoon. And the cartoon is on DVD. You can probably get it from Amazon for like $20. The whole cartoon series is on a simple DVD set. It's like 2 discs. Well, it's like 4 discs, but there's like 26 episodes in this series. It's not long. It's great. I encourage anyone to get that series. It's a fantastic series. I understand, however, a lot of the younger audiences, or people that are huge fans of the video games but didn't watch the cartoons, like, they can't, like, maybe they weren't as interested in it. But, really, in my ideal situation, I want IDW to continue. I want them to pick up the Sonic comic where it left off. Now, remember, I know, there's the obstacle. Sorry, I had to collect my thoughts and edit all that stuff out. The publisher was the comic's biggest weakness for a while. For example, they lost track of the paperwork that detailed Ken Pender's contracts about how any characters that he created for this adaptation comic were going to become part of the adaptation, and therefore wouldn't be part of, they wouldn't be his, they would be part of Sonic and Sega's canon. They lost the paperwork. They lost their old contracts, and so, because of that, Ken Penders was able to sue for copyright infringement to get his characters back, and rather than face him down in a lawsuit, they just gave him what he wanted and forced the comic into a reboot. And now the publisher, not bothering to pay the fees to continue the license, that's why the comic has ultimately ended now. The publisher, Archie Publications, they didn't keep track of their paperwork, and they decided to not even bother with the licensing fee at this point. It's sad, but true. That's how it works. IDW is a lot... I'm on the contract side of things, I'm convinced IDW will be a lot better, because IDW is a publisher that does license work a lot more often. So hopefully they can keep this going. Like, they'll be able to keep track of their paperwork for their adaptations and all this stuff and keep it good. But this is why I want them to get Ian Flynn to work for their publisher. Why I want them to get back the artists like Jamal Peppers, Tracy Yardley, Patrick Spaziante. I want them to get as many as they can that worked on the old comic to keep working on the new comic. Because I want this story to continue. There's so much more to go with this story. Like, we have so much. Like, if they could find a way to revive elements of before the Super Genesis wave, like Shard, the Metal Sonic, was left lying down in a broken, severely damaged with a cracked crystal, unknown if he was going to live or not. We had Sally, Mecha Sally, who was finally defeated in a way that didn't destroy her, and they were planning on finding a way to reverse engineer the Krutsu Vine to find a way to get it to evolve into a de-roboticizer so it could restore Sally's humanity. We had the egg bosses. We had Bunny probably running to her uncle, who was an egg boss, so that she could restore her cybernetics, so that she could become strong enough to fight Eggman again. and Antoine in a coma as a result of a Metal Sonic self-destructing itself right in his face. I mean, we had Ixis Naugus, who was going insane because the multiple personalities that made him up were trying to reassert themselves, and unable to continue using the Chaos Emerald to stabilize himself, he had possessed Jeffrey St. John, whose wife Hershey is presumed dead, but she was probably just deep undercover infiltrating an Egg Boss unit. Like, all that was really interesting, and we lost it all. Knuckles, the last of his kind, because the Tasmanian Tiger had banished all of the other echidnas into a mysterious zone, and nobody knew where they were except him. So Knuckles, who had nothing, and then gained his people back, and had love, had family, and then lost it all again. You can't tell me that these aren't compelling stories. Stories that we lost because of poorly managed contracts. But even the post-Super Genesis wave had stuff. We had new Egg Bosses. We had reimaginings of old characters. We had much more faithful adaptations of the older games and the older cartoons. They had brought back Breezy and Coconuts and Scratch and Grounder. They had done a proper adaptation to Sonic the Fighters, and they did it as an interlude to the adaptation of Sonic Unleashed. They had so much to go on. And to see all of that discarded for just another reboot, a reboot which would be far less ambitious? No! I would not enjoy that. I know the knee-jerk reaction is, oh hey, they're finally getting rid of this glorified fan character crap. They're not fan characters to me. To me, these are the characters from a beloved childhood cartoon which has been adapted and maintained for 2.5 decades and grown upon. There was character development. There was good stuff there. This was a world. This was its own unique thing, distinct from the video games. Like, tell me, Batman the Animated Series. That's held up as one of the greatest cartoon shows ever made, right? And certainly, it did adapt some stuff from the old comic book series and the old TV series. Like, yeah, this is all things that happened. But was it a one-to-one translation? Was X-Men a one-to-one translation of any particular comic book? How about the Spider-Man animated series? Think about any adaptation of an American comic book franchise. Was that comic book ever translated one-to-one in the TV show? I bet you can't think of an example. The closest thing that I can think of is the Garfield and Friends cartoon show. Yeah, when I was a little kid, there was an animated Garfield TV series, and every now and then they would use jokes that were in the newspaper comics. Like they would give 30-second shorts at the end, which were often just straight up adaptations, like of the Sundays from the comic books, from the newspaper comics. And they would stick in arcs and lines from the comic in the cartoon. But even then, even though they did references and did lines, it wasn't a one-to-one adaptation. No. Do you think there were giant robot dogs in the comic book? No. The Algae Swindler, Professor Garbanzo Bean, these weren't in the newspaper comics. They were original creations for that cartoon. And the cartoon was great. I mean, I'm pretty sure it ran for at least 4 seasons. Possibly even longer than that. Yeah. You don't make a good adaptation just by one-to-one doing it. I mean, they do it in anime, and they do it successfully in anime, but you know, like, that's not how American publishing does it. And it certainly doesn't work backwards. You don't take a TV series or a video game or a movie, make it into a comic book, and have it be more than a special or a short. It just wouldn't last. I'm telling you, it wouldn't last. So, I mean, I've gone on for this far longer than you probably thought. Even I didn't expect to feel this passionate about it. But, yes, that's my 2 cents. If you ask me, hey Angel, IDW Publishing is continuing the Sonic the Hedgehog comic. How would you like this? And I'd say, I like it very much because I like this comic. I really hope they continue the comic that existed. I hope that they continue it. I hope it's not another reboot. If it is another reboot, I hope it still chooses to do new things. Like, continue on. Like, its own world, its own characters, its own stories. Yes, you can adapt the video games, but don't make it just that. It cannot just be an adaptation of the video games. It'll be fun for a short time, but it will never last anywhere near as long as the original comic did if it's just an adaptation of the video games. And that's all I have to say on the topic. Alright, so I'm going to watch my recorded episode of Sonic Boom to record the Sonic Boom vlog, and I'll catch you next time.